If you had to choose between honor and love, which would you choose? Not in a storybook, not in a poem, but out there, under snow-heavy skies and a silence that can bury your name as quick as the wind covers your tracks. Would you follow your heart into exile? Or stay where it's warm and safe, pretending it never beat so loudly in your chest? I ask because I once knew a girl who had to answer that very question. And she didn't answer it with words. She answered it with blood. And a midnight vow no lawman ever knew about. Her name was Esther. She was 17 when she ran. Ran from Mississippi through frozen rivers and pine forests, wrapped in rags and desperation northward like a ghost. She was nobody's slave anymore, not after what she did to the man who tried to brand her. And the boy she met out in those Dakota woods, that was Elias Carr. He was the sheriff's son, but don't mistake him for a man of the badge. Elias never carried iron on his hip. Not because he was weak, no. It was because he'd seen what violence did to his father's hands, the way they trembled after a hanging, the way his eyes went distant after shooting a man in the back behind the saloon. Elias didn't want to be that kind of strong. He wanted the kind of strength that could build, not break. He lived out past the creek, where the land turned mean, alone, with just a dog named Crow and a habit of writing poems in the margins of old books. The townsfolk called him soft. His father called him a disappointment. And Elias, he just wanted quiet. He found it, until Esther stumbled onto his land barefoot and half dead, one January morning. It was snowing sideways that day, the kind of storm that feels like the sky's trying to scrape your skin off. He saw her through the trees, slumped by the base of a rock, dark skin ghost pale from the cold, and blood crusted on her shoulder. She looked like a whisper, ready to vanish. He could have turned her in, run back to town, tell his father a stranger crossed the line, but instead he carried her to his cabin. She didn't speak for 3 days. He didn't ask questions. He just kept the fire burning. She'd flinch every time the wood popped, eyes darting like she was still being hunted. And Elias, he just read aloud from one of his old books, his voice steady, never demanding. She liked the sound of it, even if she didn't understand all the words. When she finally did speak, her voice was like frost over glass, fragile, but hiding something sharp beneath. "My name's Esther," she whispered, and that was all she gave him. No past, no story. But Elias didn't need it, because he already knew. She was running. And there are only 2 kinds of people who run in the dead of a Dakota winter: the guilty and the broken. He didn't think she was guilty, and the truth is, I don't think he cared, because the first time she laughed, just a breath, a moment, Elias looked at her like a man seeing daylight for the first time in years. And I remember thinking, Lord, help that boy, not because she wasn't worth loving, but because she was. And in those days, that kind of love could get you killed. Have you ever seen someone try not to fall in love? It's a strange, quiet kind of battle. No guns, no shouting, just long glances that end too quickly, the brushing of fingers over a shared mug, the stillness in the air when the other person leaves the room. That's what it was like for Esther and Elias, like trying to hold back a flood with a handful of sand. After Esther gave her name, days slipped into one another. She stayed. He let her. No questions. Just silence, and the sound of snow tapping against the roof like it was trying to find a way inside. And maybe it already had, because whatever was outside didn't scare them half as much as what was happening between them. You ever been out in the middle of nowhere during winter? It's not just cold. It's endless. Time folds in on itself, and there's nothing left but the sound of your own thoughts and the other person's breathing. That's where it started, with the sound of her breath in the dark. Elias started chopping more wood than he needed, just to be out of the cabin long enough to miss her. Esther began sweeping the same floor twice a day, as if she were scrubbing away the guilt for staying where she didn't belong. But the truth is, she wanted to belong, just for a little while. And Elias, he never said it aloud, but you could see it plain as day. He was falling. Not like a boy chasing a pretty face. No, this was something deeper, sadder, like watching the sun rise knowing it can't stay up forever. The real trouble came when Elias's father rode up to the cabin. Sheriff Carr didn't knock. He never did. Just barged in, cold wind howling behind him like it had a badge too. Elias stood, heart stammering like a horse caught in barbed wire. Esther was in the back room. One door, no windows. "What's that smell?" the old man asked, eyeing the second plate on the table. "Boiled meat," Elias muttered, standing too stiff, too straight. "You boiling meat for ghosts now?" There was something cruel in his smile, the kind that came from knowing the world didn't hand out mercy. "I don't ask who you kill out there in town," Elias said, voice tight. "Don't ask me who I keep alive up here." The old man snorted. "You think this place is some kind of sanctuary? You don't get to choose who you save, boy. You wear my name. That means something." And there it was, that word, honor. But what did it mean to Elias? Obeying a father who'd burn a man alive for stealing bread? Carrying a gun to enforce laws written by cowards? He watched his father mount his horse and ride off without another word. That night, Elias didn't speak either. Just sat staring into the fire while Esther stood in the corner, arms folded tight, like she was trying to keep herself from crumbling. "You should let me go," she whispered. He shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." He looked at her then, like the silence had been cut in two. "I know," he said, "but I want to. And I swear to you, in that moment, the room got warmer. Not because the fire grew, but because something dangerous had just begun. What do you do when the world tells you a love is wrong, but everything in you says it's the only thing that's ever felt right? Because that's where they were. Esther and Elias. Two people who should have never met. One running from chains, the other running from a name. But the thing about the wilderness is, it doesn't care about names. Days passed slow, like honey in winter. And in that slow stretch of time, they started to build something. Not a home. Esther never called it that. She didn't trust the word. Too many homes had turned into prisons. But there was rhythm, shared chores, quiet jokes, a way she'd tilt her head when Elias tried to teach her to read, the way he watched her hands when she stitched the tear in his coat like they were telling stories without words. Once, he brought her a broken pocket watch. "It don't tell time anymore," he said, placing it in her hand. "But it still ticks." She turned it over, listened close. "I know how it feels," she said. Elias smiled, not with his mouth, but with something deeper. The kind of smile you give when someone says the thing you've been trying to say for years. They didn't kiss. Not then. They were too afraid of what it would mean. But I'll tell you something I remember clear as if it was yesterday. One night, the snow outside was so thick it looked like ghosts were dancing just beyond the window. Esther was stirring stew. Elias sat at the table, fingers ink-stained from trying to write again, and he looked up at her, quiet, soft. "If I asked you to stay," he said, "would you hate me for it?" She didn't answer, just turned back to the pot, but her hands were trembling because she wanted to say yes, and she couldn't. She had dreams that still haunted her, chains dragging through mud, screams swallowed by pine trees, and her sister, dead on the road behind her. Love couldn't erase that. No matter how warm Elias made the cabin, no matter how gentle his eyes were. And Elias, he was a good man. But being good in those days didn't mean being safe, because word was spreading. Someone saw a girl at the edge of town, too dark-skinned to be local, too silent to be passing through. Sheriff Carr came back, asking questions. He didn't come alone this time. Esther saw the horses from the hill behind the cabin. She ducked low, breath frozen in her throat. Elias found her that night, curled under the trapper's lean-to behind the cabin, staring into the dark. "You should leave," she whispered. "They're looking." He knelt beside her, brushing the snow from her shoulders. "Then let them look. Don't be foolish." "I ain't. You're putting your life on the line." He didn't say anything, just looked at her like he already had. And that's when she kissed him. Not soft, not gentle, like someone who knows she might die tomorrow and wants to leave something behind that won't melt with the snow. And I swear to you, when their lips met, the wind stopped howling. Like even the storm knew to be still. What would you give up to keep someone safe? Your name? Your family? The little piece you carved out of a brutal world. That's the thing about love in the wilderness. It doesn't grow in sunshine. It grows in blood and bone, in the places where nobody's supposed to survive. After that kiss, nothing was the same. Esther and Elias stopped pretending. He'd touch her cheek before she stirred the fire. She'd rest her head on his shoulder as the wind screamed outside. No words needed. The kind of closeness that says, if they come for me, they'll have to go through you. But love like that doesn't stay hidden for long. One morning, before sunrise, Elias found a rock placed on the fence post, split, smooth, blackened from fire. It was a sign, a warning. In the old way, it meant you're being watched. He didn't tell Esther, just brought in more wood, boarded the back window, slept closer to the rifle. But you can't keep a secret from a woman who's lived her whole life reading danger in a man's silence. That night she asked him, "When they come, what will you do?" He didn't answer right away, just kept sharpening the knife in slow circles, the sound of steel on stone filling the room. "I'll do what I have to." She looked at him then, really looked. "You'd shoot your own kin for me?" His hand stopped, the blade stilled. And that's when I think the crack in him began, because love and honor were tugging in opposite directions. One had her eyes, the other wore his father's voice. "You carry my name. That means something." Sheriff Carr came the next afternoon. No men, no horses, just him, and a rope hanging from his saddle. He didn't dismount, just stared down at his son, voice flat as a grave. "You got a runaway in there." Elias stood in the snow, jaw tight, heart pounding. "You came all this way to ask questions you already know the answers to." "I came to offer a choice." He tossed something down. A folded piece of paper, torn at the edges. A wanted notice. Esther Mayfield. Escaped property of the Morrow plantation. Last seen near Fort Pierre. Armed, dangerous. $200 reward. "Give her up," the sheriff said, "and this ends quiet. No blood, no shame." Elias didn't move, didn't blink, just bent down, picked up the paper, and lit it on fire, watched it burn in his palm until nothing but ash danced away on the wind. Sheriff Carr didn't flinch, didn't curse, just looked at him like something had died. "You're not my son anymore," he said. Elias's voice was low. "Maybe I never was." And then he rode off, rope swinging from the saddle like a shadow that hadn't yet caught up. That night, Esther tried to pack her things. "I'm not letting you lose your life over mine." "You already saved mine," Elias said. She turned, eyes wet, lips trembling. "You don't know what they'll do if they catch us." "I don't care." "You should." And then she told him everything. The sister, the blood, the long run north, the man who hurt them both, and the blade she buried in his throat while the hounds barked at the door. Elias didn't flinch. He just stepped forward and held her, tighter than before, longer than a man who plans to let go. And that's when they both knew there was no turning back. Some loves cross a line that can't be uncrossed. If the world told you your love wasn't real, would you still vow to protect it? If no church would bless it, if no family would stand beside you, would you still call it sacred? Because some marriages don't begin with rings or witnesses. Some start with a promise whispered under breath, in the dark, while the wolves circle outside. The day after Sheriff Carr rode off, the air changed. The silence got heavier, like the land itself was holding its breath. Esther stopped lighting the fire until sundown. Elias slept with his boots on. The cabin no longer felt like a refuge. It felt like a fuse, burning slow toward something neither of them could stop. That evening, the wind died. The snow stopped falling. Everything was still. And that's when Elias said it. "We should marry." Esther stared at him. Not in disbelief, not even fear, just quiet sorrow. "Elias, I don't care what the law says, or the church, or my father. I don't care if the town calls me a traitor." He stepped closer. "I know who I am when I'm with you." She swallowed hard, hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the table. "I'm not yours to keep," she said, barely a whisper. "I don't know if I ever will be." But he reached out, gently took her hand, and said the words like they were scripture. "You're not mine to keep, you're mine to stand beside." And in that moment, she nodded. Not because it was safe, not because it was easy, but because love, real love, asks not for permission, only for courage. They didn't have a preacher. They didn't need one. That night, under a sky frozen in stars, they stood behind the cabin, Esther in her patched coat, Elias in his father's old duster. He pulled a cord from his saddlebag and tied it gently around both their hands. "I vow to protect you with my life," he said, voice low but steady. "I vow to never ask you to be small," she replied, eyes gleaming with firelight. They kissed, slow and reverent, and that was it. No bells, no papers, just two souls binding themselves in a world that wanted them unbound. Later, they sat beside the hearth, the flames casting shadows on their faces. She leaned into him. He rested his chin on her hair. "Do you think anyone will ever know?" she asked. Elias didn't answer right away. He just took the broken pocket watch from the shelf, placed it in her palm. "It still ticks," he said. She closed her fingers around it, and maybe that was all they needed. Not forever, not safety, just a promise in the dark, a pact the world could never bless, but could never take away. If you knew that loving someone would cost you everything, your name, your safety, your place in the world, would you still love them? Or would you walk away and spend the rest of your life wondering what might have bloomed in the snow? Esther and Elias didn't wake up the next morning as husband and wife in the way the town would have understood. There was no new name, no new rights, no witnesses, just a pact spoken under stars that no law could erase. But out there, in the silence of the Dakota wild, they were more married than most people I've ever known. The trouble is, the world don't let love like that breathe for long. 3 days after the midnight vow, a rider was seen on the ridge. Then another, and another. It was Sheriff Carr, and 6 men with rifles, They didn't come to talk. They came to erase a mistake. Elias saw the glint of metal through the trees just before dusk. He moved without words, grabbing the old rifle, pressing Esther's hand tight, his eyes fierce with something deeper than fear. "I'm not letting them take you," he said. But Esther, she knew better than most. There are some things even love can't stop. "No," she said, "you're not dying for me. I'm living because of you," he answered. And just like that, she kissed him one last time, then slipped out the back, into the trees, into the dark. When the men arrived, they found Elias alone by the fire, unarmed, eyes sharp. They beat him anyway, left him bloodied in the snow, cabin burning behind him. No one ever found Esther. Some say she crossed into Canada. Some say she joined a group of free black homesteaders out in Montana, changed her name, started over. Some say she died that night, swallowed by the cold and the wild. But Elias never stopped looking. Not really. He rebuilt the cabin, limped for the rest of his life. Never married again. Kept the broken pocket watch by the fire, ticking its useless rhythm. And every year, on the night of the first snowfall, he tied that old cord around his wrist and sat beneath the stars, silent, still, waiting. Some folks call it a tragedy. Others call it foolishness. But me, I call it holy, because some loves are meant to defy the world, to cost something, to burn. And in the end, maybe love like that is the only thing worth leaving behind. So I ask you again, if you had to choose between honor and love, would you choose what's right or what's true? Because I knew a man once who chose both and paid the price in full.